we have Ludwig Goransson, the composer. And last but not least, please welcome Hoyt Van Hoytema, the film's cinematographer.
Thank you.
You guys, I think you might be rock stars. That was incredible. Listen, before we get into talking about this brilliant film, I do want to start by asking you all a little bit about what brought you to this stage. Where did your interest in movies, in music, in editing, in cinematography, where did that begin for each of you? Jennifer, do you want to start?
It's an easy one.
It's not a short answer. I mean, I don't have an abbreviated answer.
It doesn't have to be a short answer. We've got plenty of time.
I was always into movies as a kid. I was like a video store kid, you know, when they used to have it organized by director. I would just like go devour those videotapes, not to date myself. And then, I went to college and I made a documentary and I shot 100 hours and I had to, maybe that's an exaggeration, like 30 hours. And I had to cut it down to 10 minutes and I just became obsessed with all the different versions of the documentary I could make and any exercise. We got this one exercise. We got a bunch of film that was a robbery scene and film. So we got to recut it on a steam bag to a different, and I cut it like all from this like random little girl's perspective. So I just got really, like that was what I kind of got into in college. And then after college, I really wanted to just get a job. I didn't want to like go be a director because it just seemed like too, I just like started trying to hustle and get assistant editing jobs or PA jobs, and I just kind of committed. But I think it was just what I loved the most.
What was the first kind of film where you felt like, yes, I'm making progress here. I'm on the right path?
Well, it took me years. I moved out to LA thinking like, yeah, I'll go there and someone will help me out. And nobody helped me out. It was horrible. Because I was from the East Coast, so I went out to LA thinking it was this sunny, magical place. It was not. And then finally, someone in New York was like, oh, someone just quit on me, and I need an apprentice editor. If you come back here, I'll get you into the union and everything. And the New York world, while kind of curmudgeon-y, they're like my people, and it's kind of a small, nice community. And so, I got into the union on this movie, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, which was Sidney Lumet's last film. And actually, weirdly enough, he did film dailies. So my job was to drop the film off for the film screening dailies, which is funny because I never thought I would see that again. I thought it was like this magic special thing, and then lo and behold, I got to do it again. And he also wrapped every day at 4 to have dinner with his wife, which that has never happened to me again.
Oh, if only. Ludwig, what about you?
I started playing music very early. I started playing music with my dad, so it was kind of a way for me to connect with my dad, and we got some alone time together. I started playing guitar with them, and then when I was 9 years old, I heard Metallica for the first time, and that's when I was like, "Oh my God, this music is incredible!" So that's when my own musical interest started, and I started practicing a lot of hours a day. And then the only thing I wanted when I was a kid was a Super Nintendo, but I never got it. Instead, my dad bought me like a 4-track tape recorder and a drum machine. So I started spending all my time on like making songs, making music, and I loved making all different kinds of music, like rock, pop. In high school, I got into jazz. So I was writing jazz songs. I was writing all kind of different genres, and then I got an opportunity to write in high school to write a little piece of music for an orchestra. So I heard a 70-piece orchestra perform my music for the first time, and that was like a very cathartic experience. And I was like, how in the world can I do this again? And then I think it was also in the I went to the movie theater and I saw Kill Bill, and I was like, there was like, that piece of music when she's whistling the song and it turns into film score, and it was like, that experience was very powerful to me, and I somehow in the back of my mind I was like, okay, well, I loved to write all different genres of music, and in film, depending on what film it is, you can write all kinds of music. And after college, I did a jazz performance major in Stockholm, and then after college, I applied to go to school in LA, a film composing program, and I got in there. And It was it was sunny LA. It was far from. I grew up in Sweden, so this was my first time in the States, and it was really tough too in the beginning. It's like I didn't know anyone, never been to the States before. Felt extremely lonely. But one of my first friends at school was Ryan Coogler, and we started working together. I scored his short films, and shortly after, he did his first feature, which was called Fruitvale Station.
Yeah.
And that movie won Sundance Film Festivals, changed his career. His career blew up, and he did Creed, and then Black Panther, and then I did Tenet, and now we did a movie here called Oppenheimer.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard of that one. What's that about? Did you ever get that Super Nintendo, by the way?
No, but now I can buy any.
You probably find one on eBay. Hoyte, tell me about where your love of cinema came from.
I remember as kids, we had in Holland, we had this, we basically had 3 television channels, but it was one sort of more cultural television channel that I think on Sunday nights, they were always broadcasting films. And they were always slightly too late for us, but we would always sneak down to see. Well, especially we wanted to see the French cinema back then, because there was a lot of naked in there, and we thought it was all very fascinating. But at some point, they did a whole retrospect on a British director called Nicholas Roeg. I saw as a kid, way too young to understand them and to to really know what they were about. I saw 3 Nicholas Roeg films, but they left a huge impression, because they were extremely visual, extremely weird. But it was as I kind of recall, it was kind of the first time where you realize that there is such a thing as visual language. There's such a thing that if you photograph things a very specific way, they have some sort of an emotional impact on whoever, watches them. And I remember that those films, they left a very strong impression. And then another film that, of course, left a lot of impression on me was a film by Wim Wenders called Paris, Texas, that was shot by Robbie Mueller. And, I had the pleasure at some point in, very early in my career, just sort of after I dropped out of film school, to work on his films as a camera trainee. And we stayed friends kind of for all of his life. And I just have always loved what he said about cinematography, how he thought about cinematography, and and he has been very important to my love for telling stories in images.
I noticed there you kind of very quickly glossed over the fact that you dropped out.
I haven't gotten to today yet, but so let me.
Well, yeah. Go on.
No. But that's kind of that's kind of it for me, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. You said you dropped out of film school to go and work on.
I dropped out of a lot of places. Yeah.
Was it an easy path into cinema for you? Were there avenues available?
No, for me it was. I also have the feeling that it was very difficult. I mean, I went to film school in Poland, which I grew up in Holland, and there was a film school in Poland, and I always thought, I'm going to Poland, and when I go back after this and I tell everybody in Holland that I went to film school in Poland, everybody's going to give me jobs, and they're going to all think it's super interesting, but that was definitely not the case. I spent years, sitting in my underwear, smoking cigarettes on the couch, dreaming about a great job in the film business, but it never happened. And I guess at some point I just waited long enough for an opportunity to come by, and I was kind of so desperate then that I gripped that opportunity with both hands and unleashed like years of frustration upon it, and and made something out of it, and then slowly things started rolling. But it was, if I think back of it, it was not an easy path. It was a lot of resistance and a lot of waiting, a lot of rejection. It was not easy for me now.
Yeah. Well, the reason I wanted to start with that question to each of you is that you now arrive at a position in your careers where you're working with, I think, possibly the finest practitioner of cinema working today. You've each worked with Chris before. Hoyte, your relationship goes back to Interstellar, I think was the first one, right? And you guys on Tenet. I'd like to ask for each of you, what's special about working with a man like Chris Nolan? What's special about the environment he creates? And also, what's special about Emma Thomas as well, his producer, who it feels to me like, despite the fact that these films become huge cultural phenomena every time they're released, the actual production of them is very intimate, very very much like a family. Jennifer, can I? Oh yeah, we'll start at this end this time.
We speak about this a lot, actually, about the environment, sort of the, let's call it the creative environment of making a film like that, and no matter of the outcome or of the size of the scope the film becomes, you kind of owe it to make sort of the beginning, the work environment in the beginning, as creative as possible, and create a platform in which everybody that is involved, and that goes for the composer, editor, but myself, for instance, and my crew, can feel as creative as possible, and sort of bring the best to their abilities to the table. And I always feel that a film set, like one of Chris's film set, is for me always a very sort of free platform. And I'm not talking about a free platform is that everybody just can sort of do whatever they want, but it's kind of a platform where everybody can feel free to make a mistake from time to time, The atmosphere on the set is very intimate, but it's also it's not very precious. It's like we're all coming to work and we're all trying our best, and we all should feel free to do everything to the best of our abilities. And preciousness very often makes you scared, and that results in that you become very careful. And when you censor yourself and you are very careful, you also really limit your creativity. And I always have the feeling that on a film set with Chris, there's always taken very good care of, creating that sort of platform where everybody can feel, do great work, but feel to a certain extent relaxed about doing it, and with that feel creative,
I think that's such an important point because, I think the impression of the films that he gives us is that he's very methodical, very detail-oriented, very laser-focused. And actually, what you're describing there is an atmosphere that's open to the ideas of everybody in his orbit.
I don't want to sort of speak too much about it, but against popular belief, I think Chris is one of the most intuitive persons that I know, and because we have done so many films together, and because our prep is always so extensive, it really feels that, when we are on the set, we can do things, without the need to sort of constantly break our own, thought process over it. It's a very intuitive and loose process at that point.
Ludwig.
Yeah, I think in the music aspect, I would say Chris really understands and allows the creative process of creating music, and he doesn't use temp score in his films, which is most films you see today. It's when you do first cut, the director and the editor pull in music from already existing films. So, but what Chris does is we get started very, very early in the process. So we spend it's almost like I'm I'm in with another music artist. Like we're really spending a lot of time together, and every week we meet up and we listen. I write about 5 minutes of music every week in pre-production. I read the script. He brings me into the meetings. I watch test screenings of the costume design, test screenings of visual effects. I'm seeing that, when they're just experimenting. He even brought me into a meeting when he had, I think, I can't remember exactly, but it was like a physicist talking about quantum mechanics, and didn't understand a lot of that. But it was very interesting, and it gives me a lot of ideas, very early on. So I write about 2 hours of music before we start shooting the film, and we're creating our own music world. We're creating our own sound world, and specifically talk about sounds, themes, and building a DNA from the ground. And I think that's having the time to do that. It's crucial.
I'm really curious, when you're reading a script, obviously you're kind of imagining this movie in your head. Are you hearing music as you do that? Are ideas coming to you even on a first read?
I feel like yes and no. I think this script in particular was, it was very. I mean, it's an amazing script. You get sucked into it, and it's written from a first person perspective. So you're feeling everything that he's feeling. You're going through just like the audience did now, I was going to say also there's also music, sound design elements in the script, like the foot stomps is already in the script. The 10 seconds of silence after the Trinity test, it's in the script. So it's a very visceral experience reading it, and you do get ideas reading it.
Jennifer, what about for you?
Oh God, these guys kind of said it all really well. I don't have much to add to that. Sorry.
You did insist on the reverse order.
That's true. That's true. I think what's great about Chris, aside from what Hoyt said really beautifully, and obviously they've worked together in many more films than me, but one story that comes to mind is I remember on Tenet, I was really nerve-wracking for me because I was new. I was the new kid. I mean, I guess you were too, but I was on set and traveling around. Everyone was so lovely. But I remember I would see Chris, and he would come in sometimes, but we didn't chat much, and I was really nervous. And then I remember at the wrap thing at Warner Brothers, Nathan Crowley came. I went up to Nathan, I said goodbye to him, and I was like, I'm scared. Because it was like my time, right? And Nathan said something like, he was like, the thing about Chris, because they had done so many movies together, is he's so hyper-focused, and he's so good at just focusing and being in the moment. And when he's on set, that's his thing, right? He's in the moment. He's not editing. He's on the set, and but when he's in the editing room with you, it's going to be great. And I remember the first week of us editing together, it's true, he was so relaxed, we chatted, we had such a great time, and it was so focused, and the way I describe it is it's the most rigid, relaxed editing experience I've ever had, He sets all these crazy deadlines and all this stuff, and he never misses a deadline, but it's chill, and it's like he's funny, and we just drink tea and we work, and he'll let me mess around, or I'll be like, what, I'll do a version of a scene. I'll be like, I don't know if this is good. He's like, I don't know, you tell me. He's so not what you would imagine, and it just back to Hoyt's and kind of Ludwig's point, it allows for so much creativity, but also in a very organized manner. So it's kind of a hard thing to describe, and until I experienced, I kind of didn't believe it, but then it was great.
Well, Hoyt, we watched the film tonight on 35mm. I remember when this film came out, it took me 3 months to get a ticket to see it in IMAX on the South Bank. I don't know if anybody else had a similar experience, just trying to book tickets. It was hugely, hugely popular. I know most of this audience has seen this film before. Tell me a little bit about what you do with formats in this film, because I think we've certainly seen in Chris's work in the past the use of IMAX in big action scenes and these sequences that really lend themselves to that format. But actually here, it's in much more intimate moments that you're going to that massive format, and I'm curious what the thinking was behind that.
I can get very nerdy about this, but
be as nerdy as you want.
IMAX traditionally is very much a format that is per design sort of designed for like vistas. The gate where the film runs through is extremely big, which means there's a huge surface in which you expose light, but the size of the gate has also a relationship with the lensing that you do. So that size and the lens very much has effect on how you kind of experience perspective. You look at a screen and you're looking at a two-dimensional screen, but you're kind of experience 3 dimensions. So depth perception is very much something that you can create with those different formats. And traditionally, you would use IMAX. You would really utilize sort of the definition, the high definition, and the color depth of that big format. But the perspective was always a little flat because the lenses that were designed for these cameras, they were really designed for vistas, for things that were very, very far away and very big and very wide. And the wide lenses, they were created so you could make big wide shots that could contain a lot of things all around. But the moment that you start to get closer with a camera, those old lenses, they just stopped working. You could literally not focus those lenses closer. But we at some point, and that started already years ago, that's kind of started already on Interstellar, we started to just get very curious about, what if you can get closer with that camera, and how does depth perception start to work there, and what if you can photograph faces with it? So we started working a lot with kind of my lens guru, as I say, Dan Sasaki at Panavision, who is like this total magician when it comes to engineering, optics. And he started making lenses for us that actually could do those things. They could go closer, like a lens that for the first time we used for close-ups is on IMAX is a 40 millimeter, and it's a very wide-angle lens when you compare it to, for instance, normal format photography. But he tweaked one for us that literally we could get it up to the nose of the actors. And the idea is that, you don't only get close, but you actually physically feel the proximity of a camera towards, for instance, an actor that is in front of the camera. And, at that point, we kind of felt like, okay, this is a film that has a lot of faces, that has a lot of close-ups. What if we make those faces our landscapes, So instead of landscapes, we started really to study sort of the macro and microculture around faces. And as you've seen in this film, we went even further to that. We went onto macro level with those lenses that are normally watching vistas. Now we're suddenly allowed to watch vistas on a macro scale. So a lot of that engineering has gone towards that, and a lot of the experimentation is kind of what you see here on the screen, and what kind of led us to that format.
It's beautiful work, and that answer was not nearly as nerdy as it could have been. So thank you, Jennifer. I wonder for you, when you're working with these different formats, is that a consideration in the edit? I know that you're editing on Avid, you're editing digitally, but the work that you're doing is being printed and cut like on film as well. Does that change your relationship with it at all? Does it affect the decisions that you're making or the care that you're taking?
Not really. That's just not something. I wish I had a cooler answer for that. But it's not, I'm focused on the story and the performance, and I would never cut something for a specific type of shot. Or, I guess the only thing I worry about sometimes is if I'm cheating something. It's harder to cheat on IMAX. And there is one thing that I cheated that I was like, oh God, but I'm probably the only person that notices it. But
Go on.
No. It's just like, putting audio in someone's mouth if they're not talking or something like that. It's a bit more obvious in IMAX. But in terms of all of that complicated stuff that Hoyt is talking about and all the work that Chris and them do, that's out of my kind of wheelhouse. That's not for me to think about, and I don't think they'd want me to think about that. Or
well,
would you?
the truth is you don't want anybody to think about
Yeah.
it because ultimately that's not the goal, that people are aware of that. You want people to totally be unaware of it. You want people to live in the film.
Yeah.
The challenge then for you, I have to imagine, comes down to this is. It's a long film. That it's a huge amount of dialogue. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of, and it's so internal as well. It's so much inside Oppenheimer's head. How do you maintain pace over the course of a film this long? I mean, what kind of conversations go into just trying to figure out how to keep the audience engaged throughout the entire runtime?
It's a hard one to answer as well. I think for me, pacing is hard because that's kind of like my whole job in a way, but it's obviously such an important part of my job, but it's so hard to articulate. But I think
instinctual, maybe.
Yeah, it's a bit instinctual, and I think for this particular film, I just went back to my first experience reading the script, which I just like ripped through it, and I had just kind of this like insatiable, like I just wanted to know what happened at the end, which isn't typical of reading scripts. In fact, reading scripts is pretty horrible, but this script was just such a good read. And for me, the last third I was so into because I didn't know any of that kind of history. And I was so into the Strauss kind of Oppenheimer weird machinations of their weird rivalry and the power thing and how petty it got. But, anyway, I just wanted to recreate that feeling. And I think for me, because that part of the movie is one of my favorite parts of the movie, it was extra important to me. I mean, obviously it's my job, so it's always important. But in this film, I felt like extra passionate about making sure that that the audience was still with us at the end, right? Because obviously the bomb going off, some people are like, okay, the movie's over, bye, So you don't want, you have to. And that was always a thing that Chris and I talked about a lot is, how to keep the audience engaged after that moment and also let them know, like, it is going to end at some point. And I think Chris is so respectful of the audience, too. We have so many screenings so early on, just with one or two people in the room, but he so much wants that kind of engagement with people in the room and making sure he's knows what's going on with that. So,
Ludwig, you mentioned earlier the stomping of the feet and the silences were built into the screenplay. It's also had that ticking clock. What did those kind of metronomes do in terms of like what you wanted to do with the music? How much did they play into what you were creating?
Well, I always think it's very interesting to combine sound design and music, and how you can take something like this score is based off. Chris had one idea after I read the script, and then he told me, I'm interested in using the violin as portraying Oppenheimer, and I thought that was a great idea, and also my wife Serena is a very accomplished violinist, so I was able to work very closely with her and starting to record the violin and play around with it and trying to make sounds that I haven't heard with the violin before in terms of like sound manipulation and running it through different modulators and synthesizers and multi-track recording it and reverse it, and so that I spent a lot of time doing that first. But then I quickly realized that I need to focus. The thing I need to focus on first is the emotional core of the character. And once I got the theme, Oppenheimer's theme, then I got the emotional core. Then I was able to experiment with production, sound design, kind of implement science and math into the music. And that's where kind of the world kind of opened up for me, and I was able to apply some techniques that I haven't worked with before in terms of like tempo manipulation and something that was proven to be extremely challenging when we were going to record the music later on with the 4-to-6-piece string orchestra and record them in 21 different tempos, the challenge of that was very exciting, but also how the music really came alive with the live performance, because we did spend a lot of time with the real orchestra playing this music, and then that's also how it became just very dynamic too. It's waves throughout the whole film, and sometimes it gets. It's very intimate. I was like with the close-ups, and like you need the sound to have those dynamics I mean, nowadays most of the music that you get exposed to, it's cranked up to the maximum the whole time to keep your attention. And that's why, and in this film we have 2 hours and 43 minutes of music, but we always kind of dynamically we play a lot with the size of the ensemble, going from solo violin to full spread string orchestra, and implementing electronics and synthesizer at times and then pulling them back.
Well, it's not just Oppenheimer you theme as well. I mean, the other characters get their moments in the music. I wonder what was the thinking in terms of how those themes would interact and contrast with Oppenheimer's themes?
Yeah, so Oppenheimer's theme is on the solo violin, and then we have Strauss' theme, which is portrayed by the harp. And the way that plays a part in the story too is that the first time you hear the harp playing a Strauss theme is playing like a beautiful, sweet, lush kind of way, but then through the story, the harp progresses into being more of a mysterious element. And then for Kitty, we have a completely different sound, which is the piano, to keep it. She's kind of the one grounding the character. But then also the way towards the end you can hear Kitty's theme and Oppenheimer's theme kind of matching, going inside of each other, kind of almost like a waltz. It becomes a dance.
Hoyt, one of the things that Cillian mentioned when we spoke to him at the start of the film was that this was shot in 55 days, which I mean, maybe you could give us a sense of how much time you have had on previous Christopher Nolan productions, and whether that 55 days became a little bit of a race for you to get things done.
I mean, it's always a race, and every film with Chris is you know, those are fast shoots, and you know, they're fast shoots on one hand just because, you know, filmmaking is very expensive, and you know, you don't want to unnecessarily just, you know, spend a lot of money if you don't need to. Or put that money on other things. But then there's also another aspect, and that is, you know, that some of us, and I'm talking of myself here, you know, as well, you know, a little bit of adrenaline, you know, or a certain sort of need to work in a little bit more of a reactive way. I mean, really enhances your alertness and your creativity a lot, I think. You know, working with Chris is always, it's always fast and it's always furious, but also, you know, instead of overthinking things, you know, and then coming back a little bit to that platform we had in the beginning, you know, you're also allowed to sort of be intuitive about it, because in the end, that's also very close to the way that people see this film. You know, it's sort of an avalanche of emotions that come at you in a time span of 3 hours in a dark room. And the same thing is with color grading, for instance. At the end of every film, we color grade, right? And traditionally, when you do a digital color grade, you know, you sit in a grading suite and you see the picture, and you all the time progresses image by image forward, and you work on every image, and you have a lot of time to do it. Now, this film is color graded analog, which basically means you grade it reel by reel. So you sit in the cinema like you guys now, and you watch it and you start playing it, and you play the film real time, and all the color changes you want into the film, you kind of call them out live to the film that is moving. So effectively, you're color grading your film the same way as an audience sees it, and that's much faster. That's like in a week or in 2 weeks you're done grading your film. Traditionally, that takes people 2 months. But I really believe that doing it that way sort of brings you a little bit closer to the visceral experience of a potential audience that has to see it. So
I do wonder, though, whether there were any elements that you were worried you would be able to figure out in time, because you know, Chris is very adamant about capturing as much in camera as possible, and I mean, you're dealing with trying to photograph something that can represent subatomic particles and, you know, an atom bomb and all these kinds of different things, which takes, I would imagine, a lot of trial and error, a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, prior to filming, there's a lot of testing going on, and You know, there's a lot of little experiments, and there's a lot of short little clips that we shoot, and some things work and sometimes don't work. And then when you start filming, you know, you haven't figured out everything, and you also don't necessarily know exactly how you're going to do everything. And some things you have to learn, and some things will show itself to you or reveal itself to you. And then there's also that kind of reliance that we have and need to have on, you know, somebody like Jen, who is, you know, from a whole bunch of, you know, failed experiments and half-functioning shots and weird light gags or too small explosions, then with very clever editing, suddenly, you know, creates something that is magic and has a very big magnitude. And then Ludwig puts his music over there, and boom, magic starts to happen, you know. So it's not something that we figure out and then bring it to them, but it's like that is a whole process that just goes all the way on. And, you know, it's only on the last step where sort of the puzzle pieces fall into place and the magic kind of happens, you know. But I always love that sort of long prep period where you're just literally figuring things out and you're throwing things at the wall, and sometimes something sticks and sometimes it doesn't. And you learn all the time from your own mistakes. Very important as well is every day watching dailies. We every you know, foot we shoot of film, the next day or the next second day, we watch them projected. And so we're all confronted with our shortcomings, our mistakes, and our little victories, and we learn from it, and we take that to the next day of shooting, you know? So it's an ongoing process.
Well, Jen, just to pick up on what Hoyt said there, my understanding is that you joined this film after production had wrapped. Yeah. So tell me about what goes through your mind when you have this kind of mountain of footage that you need to try and work your way through.
Well, I've talked about it before, where for a lot of editors, they were like, "Oh God, that's horrible, don't do that." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm obviously going to do it." But no one ever gave me advice, like actual advice. Everyone was like, "It's horrible," but it worked really well for me, because it just took the pressure off. And I think this movie did have some challenges for me. You know, obviously what Hoyt is talking about with all the experimentation film and the timeline stuff, and just getting to sit by myself for 4 weeks and just start from beginning to end and just be alone with the material as opposed to being on set every day. And in this particular instance, it was quite nice, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen, we're just about out of time, but before we wrap up, I do want to ask you whether you each have kind of, it sounds like such a simple question, and I'm almost embarrassed to ask it, but whether you have a favorite moment, a favorite thing that you were able to achieve in Oppenheimer. Ludwig, why don't you start?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things that I've been thinking about, or that has been, I mean, with all Chris's films, there's so much details, right? Like I've seen this movie 50 times, and I'm still like discovering new things. And I'm in Hoyt's work, in Jen's work, but also even in like the music and how it plays in the film. And I think something that I realized recently was kind of how in the Can You Hear the Music montage in the beginning, how that is also, because I'm using the same theme in the end when you see when Oppenheimer's saying that, you know, I think we did in that last scene before the movie finishes. I'm using the same thematic material, but then putting it in a much darker tone and a darker twist, you could say. And it wasn't until recently that I kind of also realized that that's also what's happening in the edit too, like how that the montage, when you see him in the beginning of the movie, he's like discovering everything. He's so inspired. He has these beautiful visions in his mind, but then in the end, you know, it's still a montage, but he's still, instead of seeing these beautiful things, he's the rocket, and he sees the world like blowing up, and so that was something that I realized pretty recently, actually, and I thought that was really cool.
Jennifer, what about you?
Wait, something I realized recently?
No, something. A moment in the film that's your favorite, that you're particularly proud of.
I have so many. I love this movie so much. There's so many scenes. Um, I mean, the Trinity sequence I think is incredible, and I'm proud of that. And Chris and I, that was very much a very collaborative effort because I didn't even kind of touch that during my assembly because I had to get to the end of the film. So we really kind of did that together, and it was really fun. And he made it fun, and we had that piece of music that Ludwig wrote really early, so we laid that down, and yeah, it was just a really fun thing that we did, and we kind of did it in a couple of days, and we would tweak it every now and then, but it was just like we did it in a couple of days, and it was great, and it was one of those magical things, and all the pieces were incredible, and Chris was kind of like telling me the story of how it all came together too as we're watching it all, and he told me how Ruth, the production designer, kind of ended up doing a bunch more things that he didn't ask her necessarily to do, and I'm sure he's probably a little grumpy about it, but how grateful he was that she did it because we had all these extra pieces and kind of telling me what happened, and that was also kind of nice that I wasn't there because he could share all that with me. But yeah, it was just it was a nice experience putting that together.
Later.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was kind of asked today. Somebody asked me about that last close-up that we see of Oppenheimer and what I did to making that close-up look so special, and the person that asked me was very curious photographically what it is, but I realized and somehow that it's if you look at an image like that, it's not it's not the good photography, or your work is not only the pretty picture, but your work is also what you as an audience project onto it, and what you project onto it is a accumulation of everything that everybody has worked on in that film very much. It's where every channel, and every creative channel in a film sort of leads to, and the quality of that image is, in a way, you being perfectly in tune with that at that moment in time, and seeing that work is for me pure magic. That's like the ultimate cinema magic, and that's what I see now when I see that shot, and I don't see the way it's photographed or the light, but I see the whole story sort of in that face, because of these guys and because of the story and because of the history. I think that's beautiful.
What a beautiful, wonderful sentiment to end on. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to stay in your seats while we get our panel up the stairs, but please, before that, join me in putting your hands together for Jennifer Lame, Ludwig Goransson, and Hoyt Van Hoytema.